All right, let's focus on a serious environmental concern in Durban. The toxic chemical spill north of the city caused by an arson attack during the July unrest has had a severe impact. But over the past long weekend, there was also an ecoli outbreak that closed a number of beaches. Rico Euri-pido, an environmental health campaigner at environmental justice group Groundwork, joins us now to unpack this. Rico, thank you so much for your time. Let's deal with the July arson attack on UPL first. The warehouse was set on fire containing tons of herbicides. Tell us what chemicals were released in which areas and how they've been affected.
Good evening to you and your listeners. The warehouse at the time contained over 5,000 tons of chemicals in an inventory that was over 1,600 chemicals strong. And among those chemicals, some were highly hazardous herbicides, some pesticides, and a whole variety of other agrochemicals. When the inventory of that chemical list was sought by the emergency responders that were dealing with the fire to begin with, UPL never disclosed those chemicals. It never disclosed that there were some chemicals that could potentially affect the lives and the health of those emergency responders. And this is where the story kind of, begins to get a little bit murky in the world of corporate secrecy and disclosure and not, not thinking of the public health and instead hiding behind a veil of corporate kind of accountability. Because the company never disclosed the chemicals, only 2 weeks later did we know the full extent and the full danger of those chemicals. By then, the chemicals had leaked into the environment. The fire department had used an incorrect method to douse the fire. The chemicals were liberated into the lagoon. There was a massive fish kill. And here we are 3 months later, still grappling and trying to, get UPL to be transparent, to disclose exactly, what's going on in terms of the environmental monitoring, in terms of the expert reports that it's commissioned. But we are nowhere near understanding exactly what the extent of the environmental contamination is for all of those horrible reasons that are outlined to begin with.
Yeah, and you mentioned this briefly, but I want to elaborate on it. How much human, animal, mammal harm has been done? And I ask because there's been conflicting reports on just how dangerous this was.
So in the acute phase, immediately after the contaminated water had been released into the environment, and during that kind of post-acute phase, the emergency responders and the cleanup crews had collected at least 3 to 5 tons of marine life from the environment. Now, for that to happen, for that to occur, the pesticides and all of those agrochemicals had to be really highly toxic and hazardous. Even diluted in the aquatic system in the sea, and also when surfers that were using the sea and beachgoers were using the sea in the acute phase, they came out of the water with rashes, so we know that those chemicals got into the sea. For the people that were breathing in the fumes and people that were suffering from respiratory effects in the acute phase, we still don't know what that toxic mix of chemicals was, because the expert reports were commissioned by UPL, and the experts were commissioned by UPL, and they had to sign non-disclosure agreements. And for that reason, none of this information is public yet. So this non-transparency is a massive concern, because we are 3 months on, just about 12 weeks on from the incident. We have no reports of what was sampled in the environment. We have no reports of what was sampled in the air. We know that when these chemicals are in mixtures and when they are in a fire in a mixture, that they can act as precursors to other really, really dangerous chemicals, persistent chemicals that can stay in the environment for a long time. and cause really adverse health effects like cancers further down the line. So these are the big concerns, that we don't have information. The flow of information has been constrained, and it's been controlled by the company, by UPL.
So given that there's so much secrecy around, the harm that this could have caused, would you be able to say whether it's safe or not now?
So this is the big concern for Durban. Durban's crown jewels are its beaches. That is why tourists come to Durban. And the tourism sector is kind of centered around the beaches and built on the beaches. The beaches have been closed all the way from Salt Rock to the Mgeni mouth because of the UPL chemical contamination. Maybe as a precautionary measure, we don't know, because we don't have sight of any of that environmental sampling or any of that environmental information. Add to that a massive sewage leak that led to a huge spike in ecoli among all the central beaches along the Golden Mile. And that compounds the problem. And it tells a bigger story. It tells a bigger story about a non-functional and a non-capable state not being able to have oversight and good regulatory compliance among the really basic things that give the public confidence. The hugest advances in public health over the last 100 years haven't necessarily been because of modern medicine. It's been because of good public health infrastructure, good sanitation, secure water supply, so that people don't get sick from really fundamental things like diarrhea, that is linked to E. coli. Even in South Africa, I was looking at the most recent literature, 20% of deaths in under 5-year-olds are because of diarrhea. And that diarrhea can be linked directly to safe drinking water, sanitation, having the means to wash your hands. In the time of COVID, we are told to wash our hands regularly. Imagine if you can't wash your hands because the water's contaminated.
Yeah, it's such a worrying situation. Thanks so much for highlighting it for us. Rico Euri-pido, Environmental Health Campaigner at Groundwork.